All right, guys, this is Northbound Central coming back at you another YouTube video, and I really do appreciate all the love and support so far. I'm trying to get as much consistent content as I can out there because guess what? We are 2 weeks away from Florida State playing New Mexico State in Doak Campbell Stadium at 7 o'clock on the great CW network. And I say that with a grain of salt because the ACC is terrible sometimes. But I will say it is super exciting to have Florida State back in functioning and just back. It's been a long off season, and obviously Florida State's only won 7 games in the past 2 years. You want to see some positivity come from Florida State at this point. And I wonder, with Mike Norvell having all this hot seat talk and just negative comments about every little thing, and I understand he's got to prove the doubters wrong once again. But I will say that Florida State is in a better spot. I think the roster is in a good spot too. I really do like where Florida State is with a couple of things. And specifically, I want to talk about one position group that I think is kind of underrated, and that is the linebacker position. Chris Jones was added from Southern Miss this offseason, and I think he is a guy that Florida State basically had to grab in this cycle. And obviously, you can say what you want to about the transfer class not being super great, but I do think they landed a lot of key pieces on the offensive line that you're able to name as starters. You got your starting tight end. There's a couple of other guys, too, that you could probably be able to base it off of. Rylan Kennedy, Hope, has a pretty good piece. Nehemiah Chandler. The list goes on and on, but I think Chris Jones is your glorified guy that you need to have a functioning defense. It's a 3-3-5 defense. And obviously, your linebacker play last year did not go as well as you thought it would. And Chris Jones having 135 tackles last year, committed over to Ole Miss, then Florida State was able to kind of get him to unsign from Ole Miss, release his natural letter of intent, and then being able to go to Florida State afterwards. That was a huge win for Florida State because I honestly didn't think we were going to be able to get him after, he didn't visit Florida State. He went ahead and committed over to Ole Miss, and you thought SEC program, they're just going to lift the bags up and just do what they had to do. But even Makai Gaber is another guy from North Carolina and Nebraska. He played previously with Tony White. I understand Florida State fans have a little bit more PTSD with that situation because of the James Williams situation last year. But I do think Gaber is a good guy to have in this defense, and I think he can be a useful piece for you. You got a guy like Omar Graham Jr. He's more of a veteran, not really a proven guy per se, but he is a guy with experience. He's had his ups and his downs. Obviously, the same thing with Blake Nicholson, who another linebacker I was going to mention too. Those are both seniors. They have to get stuff done at this year. They have to do it. And I mean, Omar Graham had over 200 tackles in one season in high school, and he's a very productive linebacker. Same thing with Blake Nicholson. He was a four-star prospect out of high school. And I think that Florida State fans don't really understand the fact that, you have to have some of these veterans step up. It cannot just be just Chris Jones and the Chris Jones show. Isaiah Williams is a young true freshman that I think is very, very talented. Obviously, he's coming off that torn ACL, so you want to see a little bit more there. They like a Dalen Green. Obviously, Ethan Pritchard is still recovering from everything, but just having a guy that I think is one of the more underrated guys that I had discussed a little bit earlier, and that's Caleb Valley. He come from North Carolina, and he was a guy that didn't really start any during the 2024 season, but then was able to come in and start during that bowl game against UConn. I think that was kind of a big thing for him because he had 9 tackles. He was all over the field in that bowl game. And I understand bowl games are meaningless sometimes when it comes to just the productivity, and both teams were kind of out of it. It was just kind of like a battle between 6-6 and 7-5 teams. But I do think it's kind of noteworthy to think that, wow, Caleb Valley was really moving very well with his feet. Bad thing was injuries happened last year. You thought he was able to at least be coming in to get a reserve piece, but now all of a sudden he just couldn't really do much. That foot injury kept him out. He only played in one game before special teams, and then he was able to kind of shut it down for the rest of the year. And I think Florida State is really relying on him to be something special this year. Now, the fact of the matter is, a lot of this defense you're having to rely heavily on this year. It's just unproven guys that you want to see there. AJ Cottrell is another guy who's been a preferred walk-on in the past, a guy from Tampa that they really like. More of a special teams guy, but I can see him in kind of some sub packages here and there. But if you're able to get, a Chris Jones, like Caleb Valley, Blake Nicholson, Omar Graham Jr., an Isaiah Williams, and even a Gaber as well, that's 6 linebackers you could probably rotate in and out. With Chris Jones probably being your primary linebacker, but Ernie Sims is going to have to be able to continue to get this development from this group. And I think it can be a talented group. Not saying it's going to be world beaters, not going to say it's going to be an all ACC type of caliber core, but I do think that they are going to be a serviceable unit that Florida State can rely on because let's face it, you haven't really had quality linebacker play since 2023. I thought that Elijah Herring was going to be that guy for Florida State last year, but we saw how that kind of went. I just don't think there was a whole lot of energy and juice. You saw at the last part of the year, you saw Jaden Baugh run for 225 yards rushing the football, and nobody was really coming up and run support. I think that at least Chris Jones can provide you a little bit of run support. We'll see how his coverage skills go. He had an interception during his last year at Southern Miss, but I do think that this can be a factor that Florida State can really hang their hat on. But the problem is you got to have guys like Blake Nicholson, Omar Graham Jr. covering space, Gaber covering space, Jones. There's a lot of guys that need to cover in space, and you got to have it. I mean, especially if you have to have a guard, a running back, or a tight end out of the backfield, whatever the case is. I think that this is going to be an opportunity for Chris Jones to kind of make his mark on the ACC. And obviously, he's a junior, so he has one more season if he wants to be able to do that too. But I do think that Florida State is in a good position with linebackers. It's at least better than what they were before. So let me know your comments down below. What you think about this linebacker core? I do think that they are better than what they were. Do you think that this can elevate the defense to a new heights? How do you think Chris Jones is going to do this year? Do you think he's going to have over 100 tackles? I mean, that would be marvelous for a guy kind of like a Tatum Bethune had 84 tackles and 70 tackles combined with that. So he had over 154 tackles. But I do think that this can be a piece that Florida State can really rely on. And you just got to have find that linebacker alongside of him that I think can really be special. But it's like I said, 2 weeks before the season. Be sure to follow me on my Instagram account at Norvell Central, my Twitter account at Central Norvell. I also have a TikTok as well as a Facebook as well. I'm trying to get all my content out to where everyone can enjoy being able to have a communication and a community of discussion. And I'm super excited for the season as we get closer and closer. And I appreciate all the love and support as always. And go Noles.